So I would like to invite Fred Aslan, our keynote speaker for the moment. Fred is a vice president at Venrock. He also is an entrepreneur. He is the founder and CEO of Advanced Medical, a medical devices company. And he is also a board member of Bay Brazil. Fred, thank you.
Thanks, Margarides, and thanks for inviting me. It's definitely going to be a tough act to follow. Performance of Danielle. No, I'm not going to play. You don't want me touching any instruments anytime soon. Is there a presentation? So while we load up the presentation, let me just give you a little bit of background myself. So Fred Aslan, I'm from Brazil originally, but I've been living here in the US for the last 25 years. I came here to do college, and then I've stayed since. I went to medical school, I went to business school, and for the last 10 years or so, I've been working at the intersection of medicine and business. Most of the last 10 in venture capital, actually, investing in innovation in medical devices, drugs, diagnostics. Around 2 years ago, I had the idea for starting a company in Brazil to specifically commercialize medical technology innovation here in the US, in Brazil, and other countries in Latin America. And so today I'm here to tell you a little bit about what the environment is like of investing, of entrepreneurship, and of innovation in Brazil. Okay, so a little bit about Venrock. So if you ask 10 different people about entrepreneurship, Mike? All right, fine. How's this? I work in healthcare. Oh, there we go. I work in healthcare, so anything technology related, I can't say I know anything about. All right, so if you asked 10 different people about the state of investing, innovation, entrepreneurship in Brazil, you will get 10 different answers because it depends a lot from what sort of lens they're applying, right? Investing has been going on in Brazil for the last 20 to 30 years. Private equity firms have been very active in Brazil. Now we're beginning to see venture capital firms go to Brazil, as well as sort of the start of a number of incubators there. So what I'm about to present you is more from the lens of the work that I had been doing or continue to do at Venrock than visiting Brazil as somebody who lived there and grew up there, and then trying to see how do I apply what I'm seeing here to what we take for granted here in Silicon Valley. So what I hope to share with you is more some of the findings, the state of innovation, and then how the gaps are getting filled, because they are getting filled fairly rapidly. So a little bit about Venrock first. So Venrock is your prototypical venture capital firm. It's one of the oldest funds. It's been around for a very long time. It started as the venture arm of the Rockefeller family, and it's been investing, it has invested billions of dollars in over hundreds of companies, over 100 IPOs and exits, and they invest everything from technology. They were one of the first investors in Apple computers and Intel, all the way through to energy, all the way through to healthcare. So it's a pretty diversified fund, so the focus is pretty broad. The stage of investment, really the bread and butter is early stage investing. It's like company formation, Series A, Series Bs, though we also have experience investing in later stage companies and even public companies. But the focus of the work that's done is still primarily early stage. And geography, it has been mostly US investments, though the firm has had forays in other emerging markets. So Venrock was very involved in the formation of a venture capital firm called Granite Global, which has been a very active venture capital firm in China, making investments in China. There have been forays into India, into Israel, and then over the last 5 years, we've been also looking at Brazil, through my trips to Brazil and observations there, and that culminated in the first investment we've made in Brazil, which is this company, Advanced Medical, that I may have an opportunity to tell you more about, but this company that I'm now running also around 80% of my time. So let's talk first about investment, because before you can talk about entrepreneurship and innovation, one of the elements that one needs in order to take that forward is investment. A little bit of the investment universe. Again, as I mentioned before, the investment universe is very broad. The experience of somebody working in private equity is totally different from the experience of somebody working in an incubator. And we have the most data on the private equity and the public side of this chart. Because if you think about it, when you invest in another country, if you are a foreign investor looking at a new country, not only do you have to worry about risk of a business, but you also have to worry about country risk. And country risk is a very big deal. I mean, today, you know, we're looking at single-digit interest rates, we're looking at a fairly stable GDP, we're looking at a legal system that's a lot more friendly to international companies, there is less corruption, so one can even start to consider going into venture. But 10, 20 years ago, when inflation was really high, there was political instability, it was unclear what to do, people did not want to do early stage. And where they were willing to take their risk was in the private equity world. Because in private equity, that's in a way one of the easiest first places for you to deploy capital, in the sense that if you can buy a company that's already built, and it's a matter of, you know, putting good systems in place, changing out management, helping them out with strategy, and then taking them public right away, that's a little bit easier from the perspective that you're writing a big check. There's less to build there because the company is formed. You're still taking a ton of country risk, but at least you can write big checks and you can focus on just making sure the business is running well. Now the private equity industry in Brazil is becoming very competitive because a lot of the really big companies and a lot of the big roll-up ideas have already kind of done. I mean, we've had a company, BR Malls, just started rolling up every mall. We had a company, you know, Tempo Healthcare, which started rolling up all the health plans. We had a company that started to roll up all the pharmacies. So there's a trend that one sees in emerging markets, that there's a lot of capital and value that can be generated when you try to build an industry leader in an area. But after a while, everybody catches on to that, and so it becomes more and more competitive to try to generate capital via the means of trying to buy very large companies. Today, we have dozens of private equity companies in Brazil who all have to compete in order to find large companies that are suitable for a private equity investment. Don't get me wrong, they're still being successful and there's plenty of opportunity, but now that that area is more competitive, people are beginning to migrate more into the early stage. And really, early stage can be defined as, you know, it's still a large spectrum. Starting with the most advanced, you have growth. And growth is really taking a company that has already proven that they're moving in the right direction and giving them more capital for them to get to a large position. And the riskiest investment that you could possibly make is really once you start getting into the early stage venture and incubation, because there you're literally investing in an idea or a young company with a goal. And so you require a lot of investment history in the place in order to feel comfortable making those investments. But that's now where we're seeing a lot of investment going to, and that's where the bulk of innovation from the definition of global innovation will start to arise. There was a really well-done census that's done every year by Getúlio Vargas, where they actually do a survey of the investment landscape in Brazil. They look at all the private equity shops and all the venture capital firms that are active, and they do a compilation of all the investments that they have done so that they can produce reports providing some trends on what's going on and what the level of investment is. This is some data that I took from their 2010 census. It's actually a 400-page report with a lot of detail on the investment activity in Brazil. So for those of you that are interested, I'd recommend you go there. But I thought I would just share some of the highlights. This data comes from 144 private equity and venture capital firms that have reported this information. And they have compiled information on around 500 portfolio companies so that they could start to get a sense for, you know, how much capital was being invested, what was the trend for those companies, were they finding exits. And the findings are actually pretty interesting. This is a slide that shows how much capital has been committed to private equity and venture capital in Brazil. And clearly there's a growing trend here. More and more capital is being placed in Brazil, and this is all private capital to fund companies. Now, the bulk of that is still private equity, right? So this is a chart on the left-hand side that breaks down this list of 500 companies. This is actually for all the investments made in 2009, which is a list of 95 companies. Approximately half of the investments that were made in 2009 are your prototypical private equity investments, your mezzanine investments, private equity, usually large companies, but really focused on growth. And around half of that is very early stage companies, venture capital in early stage companies. Now, 95% of the capital here, though, is still going to the later companies. And this is because a lot of the companies that you will see on this chart has been part of a government effort. For example, they approached Criatec, and they told them, you guys understand innovation better than a lot of other people in Brazil, so we will give you, we being the National Development Bank, we will give you several $1 million for you to seed, 30 to 40 companies. So whereas the number of companies that look like they're being funded in the early stages is actually quite large, from a dollar perspective, it still represents less than 5%. A lot more work is needed, and there's actually quite a bit of an opportunity now to help and build these companies in Brazil. This chart just gives you a sense of which sectors things are operating. Because this is a mix of private equity and venture capital, you'll see every industry represented, everything from retail to oil and gas to biotechnology. But again, there's large private equity representation here. And very importantly, this is a list of the exits that have taken place in Brazil. Exits are extremely important because before you start investing in a country, you have to have a sense for whether there's an opportunity for you to get liquidity out of it. And there's really only two basic options. You either take the company public or the company is acquired. And the good news is that looking from the data from 2005 through 2009, there's been over 100 exits, whether they were IPOs in the Brazilian stock exchange or acquisitions by larger companies, which again has allowed the exponential growth of more and more private equity investments and now more venture capital investments. One of the things that we're beginning to see now is that now venture capital firms, as I was alluding to before, are beginning to look at Brazil as an interesting destination. So up until maybe 5 years ago, the only firms, investing firms, that would go to Brazil were the private equity shops. Now we're seeing venture capital firms going to Brazil. And over the last few years, we've seen a lot of the Bay Area firms such as Excel, Sequoia, Redpoint, Intel, making investments in Brazil, in Brazilian technology and growth companies. Again, the focus of these investments have been primarily growth, because again, in the stage of evolution, growth companies are a little bit easier to handle because there's already a company, there's an idea, there's a business, and you're investing for the expansion, but there's also some VC activity. And in the healthcare side, which is the part that I'm primarily focused, we're also seeing firms establish a presence in Brazil. So Baril, they raised the very first life sciences Brazil-only dedicated fund to only invest, it's around $150 to $200 million, only to invest in innovation in biotech and life sciences in Brazil. And then there's a number of others that are also now with a presence in Brazil trying to find interesting investment opportunities. So let me talk about entrepreneurship a little bit. What I'm about to tell you is what I find to be the biggest disconnect between what entrepreneurs in the US know versus what entrepreneurs in Brazil are beginning to learn. Is that the notion of entrepreneurship, most people that don't have a lot of experience living in the entrepreneurship ecosystem, think of entrepreneurship as a simple slide like this, which is like you have somebody with an idea, and then you have somebody with a checkbook. And the somebody with the idea goes to the person with a checkbook and they say, hey, here's my idea, can I have some money? And then the other person says, okay, great, I'll write you a check. Right? Now that is the furthest thing from the truth because it doesn't actually work like that. The person who has the idea, they can't work by themselves. Usually in order for an idea to be very successful, you need to have all the right people around you. And for an investor to write a check, they don't want to write that check by themselves. They want to write that check with others who have a shared commitment, others who have some experience. And those guys, by the way, the investor and the idea, they also need advisors behind them so that, again, you're increasing the probability that this company has success. So this is my view of actually what entrepreneurship really is. When you talk about a company, you don't talk about the one individual that has an idea. And this is one issue I see in Brazil. When I visit the biotech industry in Brazil, there are hundreds of biotech companies. They're all individual university professors that have an individual area that they do a lot of research on, and they started a company to develop that product into the market. But there are hundreds of them. Alone, they can't really do anything, because a company really is an amalgamation of a lot of great people who come together to try to make something happen. So when we invest in companies, we're not just investing in a single entrepreneur or a single idea. We're actually investing in the idea, the science behind it, the management team that have come together in order to do this. A management team will typically have experience in a variety of different areas, and it's only when people come together to try to get something done that a company begins to form. And the same thing, as I alluded to, happens in the syndicate. Investors don't like to be alone, because when you're alone, that means that you have sole responsibility for helping that company. You would love to share that responsibility with other like-minded investors. And again, the point about advisory, it's very important in your area of work to have experts in different areas that touch the whatever product development that you're doing or whatever service you're providing. That way you can actually have a comprehensive idea. When I started Advance, when I mentioned to people, yes, I've been working at Venrock and I started Advance in Brazil, immediately people assume, well, you were working at a venture firm, you had the idea of starting a Brazilian company, you just went to your boss, you asked for $5 million, and then you started Advance. And it obviously was not that simple, because I needed to create this ecosystem within Brazil in order to then approach Venrock to make the investment. So when I had the idea, and the idea is basically to commercialize medical technology in the US that we happen to know that fit very specific commercial criteria into Brazil and other countries in Latin America. Very basic idea. But in order to get that done, I am Brazilian, but I live in San Francisco, right? I've been living in the US for the last 20, 25 years. What do I know about selling products and services in Brazil? I may know the technology here, but I don't know anything about what happens on the ground. So the first thing I did was to actually find individuals on the ground who had a lot of experience commercializing medical products. These were people that worked at multinationals. These were people that had experience specifically selling medical products to doctors. And I found a number of people that were interested in the idea of doing something like this. The next thing I did, I needed to find, before going to Venrock and asking for a check, I needed to see if I could find local investors who were also excited about the idea. So I approached individuals in Brazil who had a lot of experience building businesses. They had been, repeat entrepreneurs who had capital, and they were excited about the idea if other people came around the table. On the advisor front, again, I needed all the help I could to sell products in Brazil. So I approached the former president of Bristol Myers Squibb Brazil, and I said, what if I were to create an idea like this? I approached the former Secretary of Health, and I asked him, what would you think if I started an idea like this? I approached, somebody who started a company from scratch and built it to $1 billion, and today it's publicly traded. And I said, what if I found the other guys, and they also sat with you in order to do this together? As I meet these people, and I tell them about the interest of the other people around the table, they start getting excited not just about the idea, but about the quality of everyone that is coming together in order to make this happen. After that happened, that's when I went to Venrock and I said, listen, I have this idea. We have access to the right products here. Look at all the people in Brazil on the ground who are now excited to be part of this adventure. So when he sees that he's investing alongside other investors, other advisors, and this isn't just me trying to get a company going, that's when he said, you know what? Maybe there's something here. So this is I just came back from Rio de Janeiro. There was a big conference on biotech. It was called Biopartnering Latin America. And the big topic of conversation was, how do we promote investment and innovation in Brazil? And my number one advice for the entrepreneurs there were exactly this notion of, instead of each of you starting your own company, come together, find people that have management experience, find the right advisors, and then go to investors to try to make it happen. Now, in order to build this, there's a lot of things that one needs. It's not easy to find people and experience and expertise and investors. It's a very hard thing to do, because a lot of things need to come together in order for companies to get invested. And so there are a number of gaps that are beginning to get filled by a variety of different organizations that try to help out in each one of these different areas. And the good news is there's a number of organizations that are filling these gaps. So for example, in order for you to have entrepreneurship spread and expand in a country, you need successful entrepreneurs. Successful entrepreneurs that learned how to make it work, and then they in turn decide to work with other entrepreneurs, right? They either become investors, or they work in other companies, or they decide to be board members. And giving an example, the person who developed Submarino, which was one of the first e-commerce sites to be very successful in Brazil, today he works in a private equity shop where he makes a number of different investments. His knowledge set is now conferred on 20 companies. If each of those 20 companies are successful, each of those entrepreneurs can now teach another 20 entrepreneurs how to get things to work. Endeavor is an organization that deserves a lot of credit. Endeavor is very active in Brazil. They've been very successful. And again, they have a very large amalgamation of very successful executives that are there to coach entrepreneurs. And this notion of coaching entrepreneurs is one of the biggest gaps that emerging countries have. The second element is building a knowledge base of your own industry in your own country. There's an organization called Biominas, and their whole goal is to spur the biotech industry in Brazil. They gather data on everyone working in biotech, they bring them together for conferences, they try to expose them to the international community. That helps bridge some of that gap so that people know where to find other colleagues that may have a like-minded idea. You have international funds that are now coming to Brazil. And this is a very big deal, and I use Burl as an example. So they raised a $150 million fund. Now, in order to manage this fund, there's an individual that went down there as a partner in order to lead these investments. He's somebody who lived in California for 30 years. He was CEO of a company called Syntex, which was one of Roche's largest acquisitions. So somebody very well respected and admired in the biotech industry, whose wife happened to be Brazilian. So he decided in his 60s to move back to Brazil, and now he is managing investments of this fund. That's one of the best things that could have happened to the biotech industry in Brazil, because now you have this person that has 30 years of experience developing drugs and building very large companies in Brazil, coaching entrepreneurs and making investments. So these sorts of efforts are helping bridge the gap. Another element that's very important is the work that Bay Brazil, for example, does. Because when you look at the Chinese ecosystem of venture capital, a lot of the expertise that allowed China so quickly to develop their venture capital industry is the fact that you had a lot of Chinese immigrants that came to the US, and they saw that the Chinese markets were improving, and they quickly went back, and they brought all that expertise to them. And one of the interesting things is there's a lot of Brazilians in the US, but many of us don't know each other, and we don't know that we're all here. I, for example, went to medical school. I can count in my fingers the number of Brazilians that went to medical school in the US. I mean, all of my friends up until a few years ago were all American, because I just wasn't interacting with Brazilians in the community. So it's important for efforts like Bay Brazil to be in place, because a lot of you will learn about things that are going on in Brazil via this bridge that occurs between Brazil and here. So many of you may choose to go back and may choose to help others that are in Brazil trying to make things happen. Then you have organizations such as Health Valley. Health Valley started an incubator in Brazil to specifically focus on health ideas. I'm one of the mentors for Health Valley, and what they're doing is they are trying to select and screen the most interesting healthcare ideas, and then they bring them to the US in order to meet with investors and facilitate that knowledge exchange that can happen. And then finally, you have the Brazilian National Development Bank, and I'm using an example of Criatec, where they're saying, look, we understand that doing business in Brazil is risky, and we understand that doing early stage investing is even riskier, but we will help. We will provide some initial capital to help very risky entrepreneurs take their ideas a little bit further. And this is a very important step, because to ask a fund to take all the risk of trying to do these early investments is too much. So the key message here is that in order for entrepreneurship to happen, you need a lot of these different gaps to get filled. Because in the US, we take these things for granted. If I need a CEO that has taken a company public, I can open up my Outlook, and in comes a list of 100 people that I can call. In Brazil, if you're an entrepreneur and you have an idea, it's not that simple to find another entrepreneur that will be CEO for your company and has that kind of experience. A little bit about innovation. And I know I'm covering each of these topics very rapidly, but I put on this slide 3 Venrock investments, which are your prototypical examples of innovation. And when I talk about these, I use these as examples of what I call global innovation. Because you have innovation that can be local, that's specific to a market, and then you have what I think is the extreme of innovation, which is you have an idea, and your idea is not an idea for your local community or for your local country or even for your continent. You're actually developing a product that the whole world is going to use. You're either filing patents on it, or the creativeness of the idea is just so good that actually the whole world is going to be using. So a couple of examples of that. We have a company on the healthcare side that is now allowing pregnant women to find out with a blood test if they're carrying a fetus that has Down syndrome, for example, whereas before you had to do an invasive test to get that done. On the technology side, for example, we have a company that is the largest provider of traffic data. And they use this traffic data to place this into the internet, into your car. They're actually expanding internationally into many countries. And then in the energy side, I use an example of an algae that's being genetically modified in order to produce gasoline instead of actually producing the natural oils that algae does. I mean, the company now actually has a farm. It's a proof of concept farm, but in New Mexico, they're raising algae that can produce gasoline so that it can become an alternative to energy. Now, these are examples of companies that are innovating in a way that their product, if successful, can actually go and be applicable all over the world. And so I want to walk you through the types of innovations that have been going on in Brazil and at what stage in that spectrum Brazil is today. So the first kind of innovation that you see in Brazil, where a lot of people have made investments and there's a lot of activity, is in trying to modernize local services. So this is as simple as you had the local post office, and they were a government agency, and they were inefficient, and people figured out more efficient ways, cheaper ways, more reliable ways in order to deliver your mail. That's, again, the sort of innovation that you see in many emerging markets, is people delivering better kind of service than what was already available. Another kind of innovation is developing better products and services for your own market. So this is an interesting chart that shows e-commerce in Brazil and how quickly it's growing. And then on the right-hand side, you see the leaders in market share of e-retailing. And of course, if you come up with a new product, interesting product for your local market, you will succeed because that is innovation. A third kind of innovation that we've been seeing a lot in Brazil, and this has actually attracted a lot of the venture capital firms there, are folks that are in the US. They look at a model that works, and they say, how do I domesticate this idea and take it to Brazil? So, and we've seen a lot of this happen, whether you're talking about a vertical such as like Expedia, or you're looking at, again, I'm in the healthcare world, so I'm coming up with all the e-commerce companies that I can think of. Or whether you're thinking of Zappos, or whatever innovation you're thinking about, a lot of people saw that this worked in the US, and then they decided to take it to Brazil. The challenge with this model is that in the US, usually the first person that says, Zappos, I have an idea. I'm going to create a company that's going to mail shoes to people. For the first few years, everybody's like, okay, that person's crazy, that's never going to work. After it's successful, that company is already so ahead of anybody else that chooses to copy them that they can actually be quite successful. The problem with this model in emerging markets is people recognize that a company is being successful quickly at the same time, so 5 companies start at the same time to try to get that done. And then the challenge, when you're an investor, is you say, well, not all 5 of them are going to be successful. Who's going to be the winner? And that ends up creating problems. But some people have been very successful with this. And Peixe Urbano, which is an example we've used, they really are the Groupon of Brazil. They were the first ones to do it. They executed really well, and they've been very successful because of that. Now, the ultimate innovation is when we move from innovation for my market, when you move from, I have an interesting product for Brazil, and you start to think, my product is so good in Brazil that it'll probably be good in other countries in Latin America. My product is so good in Brazil and in the rest of Latin America, maybe it's going to be interesting for the rest of the world. And when you see that shift from people thinking about innovation as something for their own market, as opposed to being a global company from day one, where you wake up and you say, I'm developing a product today that's going to serve the entire world, that's when that transition has gone all the way through. So we're not there yet at Brazil. There's a lot of people whose products have been so good that they have started to leave Brazil and go into other countries. There's actually a number of examples of that. But at least me, speaking from the healthcare side, it's very rare to find examples of cancer therapeutics, which were discovered in Brazil, and they made it to the global world. There's a couple of examples in healthcare where that has happened, but we're still not there yet. Whether we're talking about, and I'll specifically talk about healthcare because that's the area that I know the most. The state of innovation in Brazil is there in terms of universities, but then translating those ideas into product development so that they can get to the market is a part that's still missing, and that we still have a little while to go in order to have that kind of, ease of passage from university to the market the way we do here in the Bay Area. So the concluding remarks are investment, entrepreneurship, innovation are definitely thriving in Brazil. There is already a lineup of local heroes, and the list of role models continue to grow, and this is very important. There's a growing track record of success, and I'm talking everything from investments to growing companies to actually exiting, and it's critical for that to happen, because if that success happens, more success will follow. There is growing international interest in Brazilian entrepreneurship, and hence the entry maybe more than a decade ago of the private equity shops and now venture capital going down to Brazil. The gaps that I mentioned before are getting filled very rapidly, and I think we will soon see the rise. I think we're beginning to see it, but we will soon see the rise of the global Brazilian company, where you're not just developing something for Brazil as a startup, you're actually developing it for the world. That's pretty much all I had. I don't know if you want to. Are we taking questions, or maybe during the panel?
Thank you. Fred is going to join the next panel. Meanwhile, I would like to invite Eduardo Lins Henrique from Movili. Eduardo moved here a few months ago to open up Movili's operations in the Silicon Valley. And thank you, Eduardo, for being here. So we invited Eduardo and André, who will come right after Eduardo, to present a successful case. And that's what Eduardo is going to do. Eduardo.
Thank you, Margarese. So, thank you very much for the opportunity. My name is Eduardo. I'm the country manager of Movil here in US. I moved here last February to start our operations here in North America. And I'll tell our story to you guys. So, and after that I can dive in more details during the panel. So I'll tell you about Movil innovation, the art of failing, and never giving up. So, as Ivan told you in his speech, it's very important for a company to have a vision, and we have a vision. So our vision is we will be the world's best and largest mobile service company. So it's very ambitious. So we are very aggressive in our vision. And this is part of the game. This says a lot about our company. Today we are the #1 in Latin America. And we are leaders in feature phones. I'm not sure if you know, but in Brazil, for example, we have less than 10% of smartphones in our market. So 90% of our market is with feature phones. And we are leaders on this, delivering content using SMS, using WAP, using MMS as technology. We are growing very high in smartphones, and this is very important because the market is migrating from feature phones to smartphones. André Levy told this. Mobile, especially for Android, is one of the biggest opportunity in Latin America. We have almost 200 people, 190, and growing very fast too. And we grew about 70% per year in the last 3 years. And I'll tell you some steps of our story in some slides later, but we grew 35 times in revenues since our main investor joined the company. It was in 2007. What is great, it's amazing. And we are profitable and ready to scale, so we are very scalable. All this began when I was young. I remember that we had a problem in Brazil. It was a dragon, the dragon of inflation. So I'm not sure about the right info. I think we had an inflation of 30% a month. Is that right, Daniel? 30, 40% a month. What is 80 a month? It's completely, 30 is insane. 80, I have no words to say about 80% of inflation. Obscene, yeah. So this was very serious because it was impossible to start a company. It was completely crazy. Our economy didn't help anything for an entrepreneur. And after the Plano Real, we got a very stable position in terms of economy. And after the Lula government, everybody knows that the middle class in Brazil start growing their conditions to buy services and to buy goods. So I don't remember, somebody told that this is very important. I think it was Ricardo from Itaú. And the perspective is that this will continue growing. So the projection is that the middle class in Brazil will be 57% of our country. And what is happening now in terms of politics and economics is that the government is maintaining the dragon sleeping. What is good for investments and good for entrepreneurs, good for venture capitals. So Brazil today is a good place to receive investment. And I see two big events, probably the two biggest events in the world, coming to Brazil in the next years. So I feel a very positive energy in the country for the next, I don't know, 6, 8, 10 years. So this is the whole vision that I had since I started a company 10 years ago, 12 years ago, and what we are feeling now. And how do we start it? All of us, all the entrepreneurs, we were in first-class universities in Brazil, like Unicamp, like PUC-Rio, like USP, or other universities. And we left university starting a company. So immediately we finished the university, the courses, we started our companies. And yes, we were incubated, but it didn't help very much because 10 years ago, we didn't have the right people managing all these. We didn't have the right experience. It was very, very difficult. And there was almost no money. I think that Rio Bravo was in Brazil, maybe Mona X was in Brazil, some angels, but there was no money. But we did raise some money when we started our companies. And in 2007, 5 small companies in the same sector, in mobile, were in the market, and we decided to find a venture capital. It was Naspers. So Naspers is the biggest South African multimedia group. And these guys invested on us, and we started a merger and acquisition process. So all these 5 separated companies merged or were acquired. My company was one of the companies that were acquired. And then we got a leadership in Latin America. And of course, not only for merger and acquisitions, but growing our business. As a stronger company, we grew very fast. And one very important thing that I think that we can address here in the panel, in 2011, most of our shareholders started investing or acting in helping other new startups. So I think 3 or 4 of our shareholders are shareholders at 212. There's an accelerator based in New York and in Rio. These guys they have a similar model than I Combinator or 500 startups is accelerator. And me and Fabrício is our CEO in Brazil. We we are part of an angel group in Campinas, and we invest in startups from Unicamp. There is our university there. So this is very important. It's very important that when we have exits in these technology companies or in these companies that succeed, these entrepreneurs needs to help to grow the ecosystem. And now, today, what do we have in terms of challenge? We want to be a global company. We want to be the largest company in the world, so we need to be a bigger company, and we are here to expand our operations here to US, focusing the Latino market, what is a huge market. One third of California is from Latinos, and we have a huge opportunity to bring content to US, especially Latino content for smartphones. And the Latino market is not very well served in terms of content here in the US. So this is our opportunity today. And we were innovators since we was born. So we were the first company in Brazil that sent the first SMS alert with content. We were the first ringtone company that's launched the first ringtone product in Brazil. We launched the first MMS product in Brazil. All these maybe are technical terms, but all these are innovations in the mobile area, and we were always investing to be in front of competition. We were leader in D2C, direct-to-consumers content delivery. 2 years ago, we launched the first HTML5 store in the world. So everybody technical knows about HTML5 today. Everybody's talking about HTML5 today. Mark Zuckerberg was investing a lot in HTML5. And we were doing this 2 years ago. So, and to be honest, when I realized that we have a good potential to be here was last year I came with one technical guy to the Valley, and Facebook promoted the first hackathon for mobile. They launched their mobile platform, their mobile APIs, and they promoted the first hackathon. And we won the hackathon. With 35 companies, big companies like eBay, like TripAdvisor, like, I don't know, many big companies, we won the hackathon. This is the photo of our technical receiving their awards. So we have good brains, we have innovation, we have energy to create, and now I feel that we have the conditions. So it's just the beginning. Just a quick view of what we are doing. Now we have a game store where people can pay a monthly subscription and have access to 300 games. We have a TV platform similar to Netflix, but with Latino content, exclusive for smartphones. And we do the same platforms for carriers, with carriers brands. So here we are working with the biggest carrier in Brazil, the biggest carrier in Mexico. We launched this TV platform in Brazil with Claro, is América Móvil carrier in Brazil. We have more than 1 million paid users for smartphones, what is completely amazing. And here are our numbers. So we're not a startup anymore, but we have good numbers. 5 million users served in the last 2 years. 15 million monthly active users. More than 10 billion transactions made per year. Connections with more than 40 carriers in Latin America. 4 million users in mobile payments, more than 100 content providers, and 85 engineers, good engineers. And the future, what do you think about us in terms of future? We will have 100 million active users by 2015, and focus on smartphones, of course. We will be a global company. And we are very good on middle class. So we understand very well this middle-class growth in Brazil. We understand this very well in Latin America, and we are sure that we can make a fantastic and amazing job for these people. Just an introduction for the panel, one more. To be honest, in my opinion, the cycle of innovation is not finished in Brazil. So as Fred said, we need to, what is the, here. We had some success in incubators, in some venture capital, some investments in Brazil. We have some good companies growing, but we don't have extremely famous and big success cases where these entrepreneurs are investing in other companies. So we can talk more about this in the panel, and especially we have everything being done here in Silicon Valley. So if we understand and learn with these guys here, I'm really sure that Brazil can repeat the same model in our country. That's it. Thank you, Margarese.
Thank you, Eduardo. We now have another successful case of a Brazilian company, Red Drummer, and I want to introduce you to André Veloso, founder and CEO of Red Drummer. Usar esse. For those who were not here in the morning, we are tweeting in the hashtag BayBrazil.
Just waiting a little bit for the... My name is André Veloso. I'm the CEO of Red Drummer. Red Drummer is a company with the roots in Brazil. We have built the company in the last 2 years, and we have launched it in FEBRABAN event. FEBRABAN is the Brazilian Federation of Banks, and through this event we were twice innovation company. And then the government from Brazil has built a brand called Brazil IT, and they call us to go to an event in Harvard Club. It's called a Financial Technology Insights. And in this event, there were like 60 companies of technology from USA and 8 delegations from all around the world. And in the end of this event, there was a prize. It was Best New Technology. And at the end, there was us and IBM. And the nominees. And Red Drummer was Best New Technology Award, Financial Technology inside Harvard Club 2011. And since technology is technology, we're struggling to have the presentation here. It's there, okay. And so, first, I need to tell you up in advance that my English is not so good, and that sometimes it gets worse in presentations. But even knowing that, even knowing this, I would like to try to share a few ideas with you and introduce you to the concept of Red Drummer, okay? So Red Drummer, it's a cognitive enterprise operating system, which is a brand new concept from us. If we can achieve to see it, it's going to be fun. I'm going to go through it. But it's not going to get better, it's going to get worse. And, oh, tá lá. Desapareceu de novo. What a pity. Sorry. It was there. There. There's someone who can help. Help us! Detect displays. So, okay, detect displays. I promise I'll do it in 2 minutes. Detect displays.
And your talk is in the PowerPoint?
No, it's in the desktop.
Oh, okay.
You're gonna get my dirty pictures. Okay, okay. I've already did it. And it's not there. What you're doing? Oh, that's done. Right, ready. So let's start. We did it. But now it's not going down enough with this thing here. Gotta use it? Okay, forget about it. I'll do it. So Red Drummer is a cognitive enterprise operating system. We call it CEOs. How does it work? Well, I would like to try to share with you some ideas here. Just that, nothing more than that. So we search for value. Humans, we search for value every day at work and any kinds of value. So let's just focus in money for now. And money is one idea of value. So think about number one, grandpa's age. At my grandfather's age, time equals money. Then, at my father's age, information equals money. In the last 20 years, all the IT industry have created forms to make the time smaller and to increase the number of information we have access to. And now, at our age, time equals money equals information. So it's kind of like impossible for us to find an information, to take it to the Knox house, print a coin or a plastic paper, and then distribute it in order to us to spend it. So today, information is the currency for ourselves. But how to exchange information as currency? Well, value travel through collectiveness, and individuals with intuition, courage, knowledge ignite collectiveness with a vision. So, vision creates work. Sorry, vision creates value. And we work in the collectiveness to extract the value out of vision. I'm just trying to give you a glimpse about innovation. The work, produce, consume. I don't know if you understand that. Work, produce, consume. Like a closed environment. So every money that we make, we earn through work, we spend consuming. So work does not produce wellness. What produces wellness and value is vision. We at work, how do we search for value at work? We search for value through people, processes, and documents. And then we process value through meaning, relevance, and agreement. Then we exchange value with engagement, responsibility, and with freedom, if we have freedom to do it. So, in order to search, to process, and then to transmit information, we work also doing two basic things. We do planning and execution. That's the only thing we do. We plan and then we execute. So in companies, there's more people that plan more and people that execute more. But from planning to execution, we just used to do that kind of that loop in an 8. We do creative solutions to execute the plan. And then we figure out some kind of process automation for execution efficiency. And that's the way we do. We don't do anything else than that, okay? So the enterprise challenge now is how to facilitate this thing. But, well, and talking about Brazil and innovation, this is one thing that I like, which is pretty much connected to how we do planning and execution. Well, here in the United States and Europe, or countries that we have intellectual property legal environment, we do scientific innovation, and then we do business innovation, and then we do social innovation. Between scientific innovation and business innovation, we call it product. Like Thomas Edison with the light. I mean, we just figure out the product. And then from business innovation to social innovation, we call it market. And this is, again, vision and work. Because the product, we can split it in concept and execution. And market, we can split it in strategy and operations. But the funny thing is that we're talking about Brazil now. But Brazil does not know how to do scientific innovation, business innovation, and social innovation. Because the structures down there, they're not equal the structures that you have in USA, which does not mean it's bad. I mean, sometimes we talk about corruption. Corruption is not a problem in Brazil. It was never. If you compare Brazil to the rest of the South America and Latin America, there's no corruption in Brazil. It's just lack of infrastructure. I mean, just a little bit. But if you think that every time United States has, or IP, or countries that has a solid IP environment for development of products and markets, every time you have a bulb lamp that comes from scientific innovation to business to social, you have built structures in order to make it happen. Legal structures, logistics structures, everything, liability, whatever. And then you look into Brazil and say, wow, Brazil is doing social innovation, how come? Well, you know what? Because the structures that we have, sorry. The structures that we have are pretty much different because they're flexible. And if you try to do something here in the United States, you cannot do it because there's too much structure and there's no space for you to start new stuff. I mean, in a sense of it sometimes create a challenge for you to make it. So Brazil does it in a different sense. We do it from social to scientific, not from scientific to social. It's like showing you a fork. Oh, this is a fork, this is a fork. It's not a fork, it's a comb. Understand that? So we can use it in a different way without too many liability. Then, let's think about your engagement as a person with a value that we're searching for, okay? So you have in the first row, individual, personal, vision, and value. So this is the way you engage with value when you're talking about yourself alone. When you're in the collectiveness, it's a professional profile. You engage through collectiveness. There's no work alone. You work with the others. You work with people. And then there's your professional engagement, and then there's work, and then there's consume. Okay? I'm just trying to share ideas here. So what is Red Drummer? Think about when you get your personal computer and you open your personal computer, you're going to open a Windows. This is an operating system. But we forgot that at the beginning of the computers, the Windows run on top of a DOS. DOS, remember this? The green screen? But when you change your context from personal to professional, then you open your computer and you got to work with an ERP or a CRM, and those are all process automation features. It's pretty boring to work with that. But those softwares, in a collective perspective, they do the same thing that the DOS used to do in the past. It just changes that you're alone, or now you're in a collective thing, okay? Then think about you and your computer. You have your brain there, and then you have an interface of Windows, and then you have softwares and devices, you have the DOS, and then you have your chip. This is operating system. Then let's try to stretch it a little bit, your perception and the speed between your brain and your chip. And this is Red Drummer. So, you come from a chip, you go through Windows, you can access your Excel, your printer, your browser, your modem, you're into the web, and then suddenly you have information channels, you have unified communications, which is telecom stuff and browsers and routers and nets and whatever, networks. And then you have your automating processes, ERP, CRMs, whatever. And then you have your infrastructure, and then you have an operating system that enable, a cognitive operating system that enable you to process the information. Because we're used to think about a computer and a chip doing processing to us. But the fact is that we as people, we're overwhelmed with emails, tasks, interruptions, and we cannot process everything in the time that we need unless we have an operational system that copes with the cognitive structure, which is the brain. So that's what we do. Sorry about the delay.
Thank you, Andrea. Thank you. Please sit down, Andrea. I would like to invite our panelists and our moderator, Steven Ciesinski, Corporate Vice President at SRI, and also a professor here at Stanford, Alan Taylor from Endeavor, Fred Aslan. Who am I missing? Oh, where's Eduardo? Eduardo? Great, guys. Yes, please. Okay. Right here, Alan. Good to see you, Alan. Steve.
Hey, how are you? Absolutely. Absolutely.
So Steve will be moderating the panel. We are going to have a quick Q&A at the end, but we are running very late. So at the end, if you have questions, please be very brief. Thank you.
Great presentation. Do you like it? I know Mario.
Daniel, yes, Daniel Dalla Rosa.
All right, good. Yeah, I forgot to mention this. It's okay.
Well, welcome. We have a really distinguished panel here. You've already heard from a couple of the panelists already. So I'm going to ask Alan if you could introduce yourself, and who else has not introduced themselves? Danielle. So if Alan, you could start first, just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about Endeavor and what Endeavor does.
Sure. My name's Alan Taylor. I run the West Coast office here in California for Endeavor. Actually, maybe show of hands, how many people in the audience have heard of Endeavor before?
You should explain Endeavor, Alan.
Okay, I'll tell you just a little bit. Endeavor is a global nonprofit headquartered in New York that works in about 15 emerging and growth market countries now around the world, promoting what we call high-impact entrepreneurship. So we are an economic development organization. We're trying to create jobs and wealth and ecosystems of entrepreneurship in countries around the world. And we really believe in this model that we started about 15 years ago, which is about kind of identifying and supporting the highest potential entrepreneurs to become the role models and become sort of the examples and the success stories that a couple of the speakers talked about for those ecosystems. So we do this all over Latin America. We do it in the Middle East and Africa. And we've been doing it in Brazil for about 11 years now. And so we have a community of about 60 different companies that have grown to a pretty significant level of success. Mobile is actually one of them. It was an Endeavor company we first selected in 2003. And a few of the others that have been featured on the board. So the model is really all about kind of selecting the best entrepreneurs, helping them through mentorship, through connections, oftentimes through connections to investors, to take their company to the next level, and then hoping that they become the role models, and then ultimately also become kind of the next generation of angel investors and things like that in the ecosystem. So my own personal role, I used to run global programs out of New York. That's the headquarters. We've had an office here in California about the last 2.5 years that particularly connects our portfolio of high-impact entrepreneurs to mentors, investors, and partners here in Silicon Valley and kind of the Bay Area. So I'm a gringo. I'm from California, but I travel to Brazil about 8 or 10 times a year, and most recently have been a big part over the last 2 years of kind of the developing venture capital ecosystem, particularly on the technology side, in getting some of the firms that Fred mentioned, sort of Excel, Sequoia, Intel, et cetera, kind of down and operating and active in Brazil. Endeavor's been playing a big role in that through a program my team runs called the Endeavor Investor Network, which I can talk more about if it's of interest.
Great. That's a great intro, Alan. Thanks. And Danielle, you've already shown us one side of your life, which we're all very impressed with. Maybe you could talk a little bit about the Zimi Group and what you're doing.
All right. So my name is Daniel Della Rosa. I believe we belong to the first wave of Brazilians that came to the Silicon Valley in early 90s. Myself, Daniel, and John Lima, my partner, and Marshall that was here. Maybe Marshall was our CTO. He was here with us since 1992. First wave of Brazilians that came to the Silicon Valley. We first opened our company in São Paulo in 1989. Computer boards, networking. And we grew to the point of coming here and opening the branch in the Silicon Valley and moving the company to here. We grew, we expanded internationally, became global, and we were an exception because we never had any investors. We did everything organically. And the company was sold for around $100 million in 2006. Since then, I opened a number of ventures. One of them is this one called Zimi Group, and we give training to entrepreneurs in Brazil. It's a one-day training that I dedicated to the entrepreneurs in Brazil. We have been doing with Endeavor, very successful in Brazil. We did in July the first 2 courses, and I'm going back in October in 6 different capitals in Brazil to give this training. Thank you.
Great. So the title of this panel, of course, the whole afternoon is dedicated to a Brazilian ecosystem of entrepreneurship and innovation. And some of you have already spoken about the areas in entrepreneurship and innovation. And Fred, I wanted to see if you could comment. You're a pretty seasoned venture capitalist with certainly a well-known brand, Venrock. And you pointed out that there's something like, I think, $36 billion of private equity and VC money and the growth has been substantial, I think 40% plus in the past few years. And I know that's not your chart. You actually quoted from a survey that was done. But I took a quick multiplication of the 4 or 5% that was supposed to be for seed and VC times 36 billion, and I came up with, I came up with a fairly large number, a couple of billion. So do you really think, how much do you think is in terms of the hundreds of millions, or maybe is it greater than $1 billion that is being spent and being invested on an annual basis now in early stage seed and venture capital? Do you have a feel for that? Maybe some of the others can comment as well.
Maybe some of the others may know better, because one of the specific things I did yesterday was call up the person who was the author of that survey, and I specifically asked that question.
Oh, good.
And he said that one of the challenges is that most of the work that they have done has focused around private equity, but they've also included some of these government initiatives. And so that's why I put the less than 5%, because he actually thought it was a small number. He wasn't ready to quantify it for me. Having said that, again, I think a couple of the examples that we can look at, if we look at the funds that were raised by some of the US firms to invest specifically in Brazil, using, again, in healthcare, Burrell that raised 150 just to invest in Brazil. I actually do think that we're getting close to perhaps, $1 billion or over $1 billion specifically for this effort. If you include what the development bank is doing, what's coming in via some of these different venture capital shops, and there's local firms in Brazil that are also raising capital. I think that number is actually
So of course, let's distinguish here for the audience that raising $100 million, that gets spread out over a period of time. But I think you're making a very important point. If these funds are getting built up to 100, 200 million and so forth, over time, that investment money is going to start to either approach or exceed by far $1 billion. And what are the hot areas that you guys are seeing? Alan, you want to comment?
Sure.
You don't think it's $1 billion, or you think it's
$1 billion?
Well, maybe
I'll piggyback on Fred's answer a little bit. We've been bugging FGV and a bunch of the others, and Lavka and everybody who does this data, to try to split PE and VC so you can have a meaningful conversation about the venture capital piece of this. Largely because that $36 billion headline number just distorts everything else you try to talk about when you try to get to a venture level.
Right.
I actually do agree with Fred. I think if you look at Burrell, and also on the tech side, if you look at things like Redpoint and eVentures coming together to launch the first kind of Brazil designated fund from a global Silicon Valley kind of group, looking just to Brazil. In terms of assets under management, yeah, we're getting up into several hundreds of millions, maybe even $1 billion, I don't know. That's certainly not capital deployed, right? I mean, that's a whole different ballgame. One of the things Endeavor's been working a lot on trying to track and trend and understand in order to better help entrepreneurs is how much money is actually getting invested kind of quarter by quarter in different sectors, and that's really hard to do at an early stage because it's so private. I mean, because many investments and deals that get made, yes, people know about them, but they're not showing up in any press releases or any sorts of public data sets. And so I think that's increasingly always going to be a challenge when you're trying to figure out what's really going on and how much is really being invested.
I got some information here.
You do? Go ahead, Doug.
BNDES said we will invest $1 billion in VC money for small and medium businesses in doing this event, I guess, this year. They said volume of investment in VC, 1.1 billion in 2010, 7 billion in 2011, and 20% growth compared to 2011 and 2012.
Okay. Well, those are interesting figures. I took a group from the Graduate School of Business students down, and we talked to Manashi's, I think it was, and he was not as optimistic about how much is being spent. He's feeling rather lonely still there, but he's hoping that things are going to get much better as some of these companies start to really take hold. But let me pick up on the entrepreneurs here who have sold their businesses or who have grown their businesses, the three of you at least, and Fred aspiring so in your business. What are the barriers beyond the usual barriers that one has, say, even in Silicon Valley of starting up a business? What are the barriers, the top three, if you could just tick them off, that you think you face as an entrepreneur in Brazil?
In Brazil, to enter in Brazil, or I can tell you more about my experience.
If you want to start up a business in Brazil, what are the three things that are going to keep you up at night beyond what we normally have about the things here in
Brazil? I think that one point is people. So
people mean employees, potential employees.
Yeah. Why? Because the competition is strong for good people. So
are people afraid to go work for a startup in Brazil?
Yeah. Yeah, in Brazil we don't have the stock options culture. It doesn't exist. People don't understand.
So for example, in our company, we have a stock options plan, but you need to explain hard to people what does it mean.
Okay.
And people don't understand that sometimes, for example, here in the Valley, you have one third of your salary, but you have more risk. So in Brazil, people don't understand to balance, don't balance the risk and their salaries.
Okay, so that's a great point, Eduardo. Andre?
Well, I don't think that doing business in Brazil is kind of like harder or easier than doing business here. To me, it's the same thing. I have just a few experience. I've been only with 2 VCs in my life. I mean, I thought it was fun because we were with a VC, a fund that was starting in Brazil. The guy went to my office, and then he saw the system, he saw the clients, and he asked me, well, are you able to scale this product to millions of users? And then that was in Portuguese. And then I asked him, well, have you ever scaled a business to thousands of users? Of course no, because VCs are down there since the last 2 years. So I really agree with Ricardo from Ricardo Guerra. The challenge is in the time. It's going to be there. It's a time to the market to get mature. I mean, maturity. It's starting. It's going to get there.
Okay.
So taxes is one issue.
Taxes.
Yeah,
Go ahead. Talk about this, Toni.
We always knew.
You need to talk into the speaker a little bit.
Yeah, being a Brazilian, we always, having the company there too, and doing business in Brazil, we know it's tough, but I got a figure here I was not aware. See, companies in Brazil pay 67% of their profit in taxes versus 47% in US. That's a figure I didn't know exactly, so we know we pay more taxes there. Number 2 is bureaucracy. A lot of bureaucracy to open a company in Brazil. Look, another figure here. 119 days to register a company in Brazil compared to 6 days in US. When we open our company in Singapore, our branch in Singapore, as far as I could remember, it's online. You can open your branch in Singapore online.
Right.
You see, these are 2 challenges.
Okay, so taxes and bureaucracy. Go ahead, Fred.
Yeah, and then just to kind of piggyback on the difficulty of doing business. I mean, one, I think starting the company is a big one. The bureaucracy is very high. When we started the US subsidiary of our company, we did it in 24 hours. In Brazil, it literally took us 4 months to open a bank account. And we had expensive lawyers, working on it.
4 months and expensive lawyers to open up a bank account in Brazil.
The other issue is...
who represents a bank here?
The other issue is again, the rule of law is a little bit more challenging because, we import products and we sell.
Right.
If my product gets stuck in customs, we're a fully compliant entity. All my competitors can just pay off the person at customs to get the product through. I can't do that because then my business is shut down. That's a major problem because if my shipment gets stuck in customs, now I have to bring in the expensive lawyers again to actually try to deal with this in an administrative process, and that's expensive.
Have you personally with your company experienced that?
I have. Our shipment was stuck in customs. The person that had the shipment said, I'm sorry, I'm seeing a number of different violations here. They weren't real violations, so we had to bring in the lawyers. The good news is 2 months into it, they managed to solve the problem. But I know that my competitors...
How expensive was it to get it?
Probably cost us $20,000. So it's not that bad in this specific example, but to give you a sense, the shipment itself was $100,000. So that was 20% of the value of the shipment just to get it through customs because it got stuck there. Whereas a lot of my competitors can simply just, pay off, which is a really bad culture that, is still there. But I would say that these things make business a little bit more challenging. But on the flip side, that's the opportunity, is that in the middle of a lot of disorganization, if you were brave enough to get the capital and to get the work done and you put systems in place, you can be rewarded for it. Whereas here, you don't really innovate on following the law. That's not a particularly special thing that you do here. So there's some advantages in working in places where things are getting a little better because if you succeed, now you've created something unique.
Okay, great. Any other?
Can I just add one thing? I know it's hard. It's maybe it takes longer to open a company or to open a bank account, but this is just a matter of planning. Because this is Brazil, that's the way it works. We're trying to improve. But if it takes like 100 days, you're going to open a company. You got to know that because you're not gonna. This is planning. It's part of the planning. So it does not make it harder or easier. Of course, the taxes are pretty high yet, and just figuring out that if it's so fast for you to open a company, it takes like a little bit more to sue a guy that owns a company there because here you can sue faster. There you can sue slower. So there's a
No, well, so I mean, I just want to disagree with that a little bit because, as you know, I mean, again, I think somebody used the example of Instagram. They went from $0 to $1 billion in 2 years. You don't have 4 months to plan to open a bank account.
Exactly.
While my shipment is stuck in customs, my competitor has sold his product to the doctor, right? I mean, you can't compete and be fast but you can't plan for customs is going to, you know, a customer decides to buy a product.
A strike. I mean, a strike. Customs in a strike.
Right, exactly. How do you plan for that?
This is the risk of Brazil.
No, exactly.
It's an uncertainty environment.
That's what makes it more challenging.
Okay, so great. What are some enablers for doing business in Brazil? Now that we've set up some barriers, okay, some issues that you have to struggle through as an entrepreneur, why would you want to be an entrepreneur in Brazil?
I mean, I can start with opportunity. I mean, because one of the things that I think we take for granted is there's a lot of great ideas in the world, proven models, proven businesses, things that work really well. And when you look at Brazil, there is so much opportunity to improve the way things are done. A lot of privatizations, any sector in the economy that you look at, there's plenty of opportunities to find ways to make things better without necessarily taking a crazy risk. I mean, somebody had to figure out that creating a community in the internet would have everybody go into it. In Brazil, you develop a better way to ship your mail, that's already a really interesting, innovative company. You know, so the opportunity to actually do things better is really overwhelming.
Huge opportunity to
improvement,
make things. Yeah, Andre, Alan, the type of businesses that you guys get involved with, is it something along those lines? Or?
Absolutely, and I think even just to kind of take that concept of opportunity and think about the level of impact you can have within it, right? So in the Valley or in markets that are sort of hyper-developed and hyper-mature in certain ways, you can make little incremental improvements and kind of innovations. You can kind of make major kind of jumps and changes and leaps with companies in markets like Brazil and some of the other places Endeavor works, right? Turkey, South Africa, Mexico, Argentina, et cetera, where you can go into what's existing there and say, you know what, there's the chance to have a huge impact here because we can actually make a really big difference and solve a big, hard problem in what you're doing. So.
Okay, Eduardo, you want to comment?
No, I totally agree. And in some sectors, we see opportunities bigger. For example, in mobile, we see extraordinary opportunities growing up for new apps with solving local problems. For example, I can say an example. I'm not sure if you are aware about Uber. Here is the taxi company here in
everybody here is an Uber person, right?
Yeah.
Everybody know what Uber is? Uber is an instant taxi you can get that's a qualified taxi. You pay a little bit extra, but you feel safe.
So probably Uber will not work in Brazil exactly the same that is working here. Why? Because simply people don't have credit card. Massive people don't have credit card, and we have some regulations point. So there is a company called Resolve AI that is closing partnerships with local taxi companies, and they adapt the Uber model to Brazil. It's the same as Peixe Urbano that did it in Grupo. So they are growing very fast, very fast. So all these adaptations, if the company understands the idea and understand how to adapt, the opportunities are totally huge. I totally agree with Fred.
So I wanted to, you brought up a very good point, is this sort of copycat model that we're hearing more and more about. I'm sure people want to talk about this. Taking business models like Groupon business model, eBay business model, what have you, and bringing it to different countries. That seems to be pretty evident in Brazil. Is that true, Andre?
In technology, we have a kind of a heritage. That's what we've been doing a lot. Mimetizing, copying business models, or selling services. I mean, outsourcing. But this is not the best thing. This is not the best kind of opportunity that exists in Brazil. Because Brazil is very creative, and it is creative. So he will propose business models and products in a few years. I mean, that's the best thing we got to show, because this kind of opportunity, just copying something, well, this is only for money.
Yeah, I don't agree that it's only copy. I understand your point, and I agree with you that Brazil can bring more to the table in terms of innovation and new models, new technology. I totally agree, but I think that to execute a plan or to deliver a product to a market, understanding their details skills and their adaptations that are needed is part of innovation. It's part of the success, and it's hard. It's not easy. So if you ask to Julio from Peixe Urbano if it was easy to get in the place that he is today, he would say, no, it was very difficult. I got an idea, I got the same model, and I'm replicating. So they need to understand the country, understand the customer. The customer is different. The customer problem is different in Brazil. This is what sometimes the foreign people don't understand. Sometimes the people simply don't have a smartphone today in Brazil. So how can I use Uber in a massive market in Brazil if I don't?
Okay, so taking an existing business model, it's not so easy. You really have to get in there, really understand the market. Daniel, would you agree? You wanna?
I totally agree, but I'd like to go back to your enabler.
Yeah, go ahead.
One is opportunities. It's the land of opportunities. 200 million people, but also, you know, the music. I went back to I was musician, amateur musician, and then I became professional. To study more music, I could see the polka, the European music being adopted in Brazil in the 1850s. Brazilian music is a mixture of many different types of music and the African syncopation. So Brazilians are very much willing to accept innovation and run into the risks of accepting new technologies. We saw this with the TV, the first TV station opened in Brazil in 1950s. Color TV or the internet. So the culture in Brazil accepts, embraces innovation and even risks. Differently, for example, from Japan, let's say, that's more conservative. That's another enabler.
So I'm going to turn, Alan, could you comment on, change the subject slightly. Chile, 19 million people, Brazil about 200 million people, so about 10 to 1. Chile, I'm familiar a lot with what's going in Chile, with Startup Chile. Are people familiar with Startup Chile, the program that's going on there? I know you are. And with Mercado, a program for Chilean investors. Is there anything like that happening in Brazil? Is there an equivalent of a national venture capital association of some sort being formed in Brazil? Is there some sort, so that we can get these statistics to be valid and validated and start to understand better what's going on? Because it's still, you know, a little bit of a mystery here.
Yeah, I mean, so Endeavor is present in 6 countries in Latin America: Mexico, Colombia, Chile, Argentina, Uruguay, and Brazil. Nice. We do a lot of kind of comparing across those economies and trying to understand the different initiatives.
Give us a little bit of education on where these countries stand in terms of their sophistication with respect to VC and funding VCs and so on.
So Brazil's the biggest market, and certainly when it comes to venture capital, Brazil is the most advanced among those 6. In fact, for Endeavor globally, for the world globally, right? Venture really only happens in a few places, right? US and Canada, Europe, Israel, China, India. That's kind of it. It's not a fully globalized industry. Endeavor is starting to see, basically with Brazil and Turkey kind of at the forefront, new markets where venture is starting to take hold. And that really is in terms of local funds really getting developed on the early stage investment side, and global investors coming in and doing kind of what would look more like traditional venture capital or growth equity investments. So not PE and big stuff. So Brazil is kind of, in terms of the amount of things happening in earlier stage venture capital, there's more activity and more going on than other places in Latin America or in the emerging world where Endeavor works. But that's largely because of the market size, more than anything else. I think it's demographics and market. I don't think it's a Startup Chile type program or a great initiative or anything happening. I mean, Fred talked about Korea Tech and some of the kind of initiatives trying to start to seed this industry for Brazil. I think those are interesting. My honest take on Startup Chile is it's one of the most cost-effective and impressive marketing initiatives you could ever do, right? It's raised the profile of a very small country in South America onto a global stage as being sort of an entrepreneurship hub. I don't think we'll know for 3 or 4 or 5 more years if it actually has had a significant lasting impact on entrepreneurship in Chile, but it certainly has put Chile on the map in a pretty interesting way. From our own work in Brazil, looking at venture capital, looking at entrepreneurs raising money, call it a traditional VC or kind of growth stage, right? So $1 million to $20 million, kind of the size of a round. We think a lot more of that's still going to keep happening in Brazil, but we're going to see spillover into Argentina and into Colombia. And that the kind of big question mark for us on will it take off or not is Mexico, where it's a lot further behind Brazil, but has a lot of the same characteristics and certainly could get a venture industry going there. I led a trip for Silicon Valley VCs to Mexico in May of this year that looked a lot like the one we did 2.5 years ago to Sao Paulo. So, you know, it's kind of an interesting comparison point.
Great.
Do you have the figures, how much in Chile the VC money is? Because I have BNDES is going to invest $1 billion. How much of money is there in Chile, for example, in VC money?
So there are 4 or 5 local funds in Chile that are actively investing.
That's right.
They're all in the tens of millions of dollars. They're smaller. It's
pretty small.
funds.
So
And I
this
think
$1
that
billion
Chile is more in the angel investments for startups. All this marketing program is first.
They do have a lot of government support, though,
Yeah.
central government support. The idea of
focus on
startup, for those of you who don't know, Startup Chile is a program that got going a couple years ago, and it's very popular. The government is putting out $40,000 or $50,000 per team to bring a team to start up a company in Chile.
So yeah, it's much earlier stage.
And you have about 5 or 6 months. It's essentially a seed round. Now, $40,000 in Chile is maybe the equivalent of $100,000 or $120,000 here. It's maybe 2.5 to 3 times or something like that for the U.S. But it's a stimulus to try to make Chileans aware that entrepreneurship exists and innovation can exist, and also to start to bring in a lot of diversity from other countries so that Chileans can think about export, not just their own markets and so on. I want to turn now to the audience because we've been really stimulated by this fantastic group of panelists keeping things moving. Who's got a question for the panel? Don't be bashful. I know Brazilians are not shy. Yes? Fred.
Yeah, so from what you described, my experience so far between entrepreneurs in the U.S. and Brazil, one of the big challenges to bridge the idea to the investor is the concept of ownership. What I feel is that in the United States, one of the basic concepts of venture capital is the inventor or the owner of the idea has to transfer that IP or that idea to the company. Otherwise, the investors will not put money in that company. You can't rely on the fact that an individual owns the IP or owns the idea, because if that person passes away or if that person leaves the company, you have nothing. So that's one of the basic steps when you start investing, is to make sure that your IP, that your idea belongs to the entity, belongs to the company. When you transfer that concept down to Brazil, my experience shows that Brazilians hold a lot more to ownership. They have a harder time letting go. So if you look, for example, at a professor at a university that has a great idea, if you approach him and says, okay, if you say, you have to give me your idea, transfer this idea to a company, and then we're going to fund this idea to make sure you generate revenue, he probably freaks out. He'll say, no, I've been working on this for the last 30 years. I'm not going to give up my idea because then you're going to push me out and I don't have anything. So I've seen this delay the process tremendously, because you have to change the person's mindset and actually convert a university professor into an entrepreneur. So my question is, I want your thoughts on that, because you know both markets very well, and if you've had issues with these things.
Yeah, no, I agree 100% with you, because you know, one observation that I had, I think it's growing up in Brazil, I feel like there's something very inherently Brazilian, which is, you know, we've gone through so much of, you know, our bank accounts being frozen. You try to do things correctly, and then people just, you know, pay other people off, and they get ahead. You almost have a little paranoia of somebody actually cheating you over, and that's a very difficult instinct for you to give up, because you grew up with that. I think it's a generational thing that starts to kind of go away over time as people are given opportunities. In the U.S., to your point, people are used to this concept of like, all right, I'm going to have to trust, you know, my advisors and the investors, but hopefully these are good people that I can trust and things will work out okay. I would rather have a small piece of a bigger pie than have, you know, a big slice of a much smaller pie. And that is very tough. I find that, again, this is an issue with talent. When I try to join up forces with other people who are also really good, I say, come join me in my company, and it's always like, well, I could just do my own company, you know, and that's always not the ideal thing, because if you join forces with a lot of people, you create a massive leader. But if everybody wants to have their own biotech company, which is the example you're using, like there's hundreds of them, none of them are going to get funded, because it's all betting on individuals that are not willing to pool together. So I agree with that. It is a challenge.
Great. Other questions? Thank you. That's a great question. Up here.
Fred again. I'm sorry?
Give your name and then your address.
Robson. It's my name. It's for Fred. So Fred, do you have, I'm a physician here, and I just want to have an idea how it is to work, you feel it work to compare Anvisa with FDA for the local investors. Let's say you want to develop a medical device company in Brazil. What would be the challenges FDA compared to Anvisa, for example?
Yeah, I mean, just very simplistically, for the sake of this, the FDA has a much bigger responsibility than Anvisa because the FDA tells companies how to prove that their product works. And that's very hard. Anvisa doesn't do that. Anvisa just has a bureaucratic process that if something is approved in another country...
Would you explain what's FDA?
Oh, so FDA, again, to those of you that don't know, this is the government agency that regulates the approval and commercialization of medical products, and Anvisa is the Brazilian equivalent of that. So in order for a medical product to be sold in the US, you need FDA approval. In order for you to be approved in Brazil, you need Anvisa approval. So in the US, Anvisa basically says, if you are a company and you've been approved in another country, we will approve your product. However, because of the bureaucracy, it can sometimes take 2 years for them to review the file. It's not that they're going to be like the FDA saying, oh, the product is not good enough, you haven't satisfied me in your trial. Anvisa just doesn't have enough resources to get things approved very quickly. So it's more bureaucratic in Brazil, but it's easier to get through it. FDA, less bureaucratic, more difficult to get through it.
Let's put it this way. You're talking about in a scene where you have a company here wants to sell your product in Brazil. Let's say you want to develop a company down in Brazil and R&D in Brazil and development. Do you have any thoughts or experience?
Yeah, there is a government incentive to try to stimulate domestic industry. So I think that if you're a company in the US developing a product, it will be harder for FDA to approve your American product in the US than it will be for Anvisa to approve a Brazilian product in Brazil. The challenge you have developing your Brazilian product in Brazil is you have less expertise. Again, back to this point about talent, there aren't that many people that have developed a product all the way from idea into the clinic. And so it makes that part more challenging, even though it's easier.
Great. Other questions up on the top?
Yeah, I just have a quick question.
Whoa, way at the top. Well, we'll get, you're next.
How would you differentiate between industries like medical devices, which are more IP-centric, and they rely on IP protection, versus those, let's say, mobile applications which don't necessarily rely on IP protection, and their success in the Brazilian market?
Yeah, so I would say that the challenge with importing medical devices is that, back to that point around IP is tough in Brazil. I mean, I experienced this today. I'm importing a product that was approved by the FDA. It's the only one to do this particular product. I took it to Brazil. Within 6 months, there were 25 companies selling a product that were copying what that company was doing, and they sell it for 1/10 of the price.
25 companies. 25 companies.
Now, they weren't all, they were companies in Brazil that found a copycat in China, Korea, Europe, and they brought it into Brazil to sell because we were doing advertising of our branded product. They were selling it to people.
Jumping on your coattails, so to speak.
Yes, and so the challenge for IP-protected companies is that in many instances it's very difficult to protect IP, whereas when you offer a good service, if people like it, they're going to use it. They're not going to base it on the IP.
Danielle, do you have any comment on the IP issue here?
It's a situation. For example, when we opened it, we had a unique product, and the lawyer said, I want to patent it here, INPI, right? You will.
It's impossible.
INPI?
Yeah.
Help me.
Yeah.
It's
in Brazil, yeah.
It's an agency in Rio de Janeiro called INPI. You send the process. Don't patent it. Why? Because it takes 5 years for you to get the patent. By the time 5 years, the technology is obsolete. So we didn't do it. But one company.
So you kept it as a trade secret.
Well, we kept it, but one company copied our product, somehow copied, and we got them very nicely. It worked very well with the software side. That's ABIS, Associação Brasileira de Preços, helped us a lot, and it's much easier to catch that company because of software violation, not hardware violation.
Eduardo and Alan, can you comment on IP regulations and so forth in Brazil? Obviously, they're very strong here in the U.S. How do you're in the telecommunications?
I'd like just to finish answering her questions about mobile, how to enter in Brazil. Everything is changing a lot in mobile, especially because of Apple and Google. And in Brazil, pay attention with Google, with Andre. Why does it is changing? Because in the last 10 years, to launch something in mobile in Brazil, you need to be friend of carrier. You need to be a partner of carrier. And it's very, 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 very difficult to deal with carriers. Very difficult.
That's pretty difficult,
to
I
make
think.
business with mobile carriers.
That's true everywhere, Eduardo.
Yeah. And no, it's very difficult.
It is not much fun here in the States.
And what is happening now is that carrier have no power in their smartphone marketplace. In the smartphone market. It just, from here, you can launch an app and you just publish your app in Google Play or in Apple Store and you are live. And you start marketing and etc. Of course, you need to understand how to promote your app, etc. About IPs, I don't have a good experience in patents in Brazil, especially because the same reason that Daniel highlighted. The process spent, I don't know, 5 years. And in technology, I don't have 4 months to wait for CNPq to approve some budget to me. So we need to launch something today because next month it's a competitor will launch something. So
your issue is quick to market and get it out there.
Yeah, go fast and fast. Our company is starting a patent process for the first time, and we here in US. Here in US. By the way,
the question is, I guess his question is, we didn't answer it. Can you enforce your IP that you have the patents in Brazil?
From Brazil? No, it's impossible.
It's very hard.
Yeah, Alan, you have 60 investments in 60 companies in Brazil.
We do.
So talk about your experience.
So Endeavor's industry agnostic, meaning we work with companies across industries.
Of course.
And to tie this back to the trend of kind of global copycats, nobody's really safe, right? It doesn't matter what industry you're in. Somebody's going to copy your product, your business model, something about what you're doing. Most of our entrepreneurs win on speed and execution. Very few win on defensible patents because it takes way too much time and money to protect them. So oftentimes the mentors in our network really coach people on, that should not be your strategy for winning. You have to figure out a different way that you're going to win. Now some, things like the medical devices and things that Fred's talking about, pretty specific, niches there. But in general, it really is about kind of speed and execution and growing the company.
Thanks. Thank you, Alan. Let's see, other questions? There was a gentleman up here. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah.
Patiently.
Hi, my name's Raj Patel. I'm an American based in São Paulo now. And I just have a question for you guys. How do you feel is the best strategy to identify Brazilians that would be like either good co-founders or early hires for a startup? And I'm thinking specifically about the sales role because I think this question might apply to anyone building a startup in Brazil. It probably does make sense to have a sales team that's Brazilian. So finding those types of people is, I think, a big challenge. And I was wondering if you guys have any insight on that for anyone out there.
Go ahead, Andre.
Well, what I did down there, I turned it to the other side. I didn't try to hire the boys. I hired people over 50s. Because for the first time in the economy, we have the chance of having guys over 60s and guys on 40s working in the same time. So we have the best guys ever. Between 50 and 60, in Brazil we have 8 in the company. One with 73 years old.
So that's a great, can you follow that up? And why would people like that? I would expect that people like that would be extremely risk averse in terms of joining a startup.
Yeah, in a sense, those guys
talk about that.
Yeah, those guys are already established in life. I mean, they have made a life.
Okay.
They are solid engineers with a solid background. It's not a cheap university out of somewhere. They have had a tough life. I mean, building really stuff from mainframes.
Okay.
And I'm not bragging. We have the best team ever down there, and they're all older than me.
Anybody else to comment on Raj's question?
I think it's very difficult. Competition is huge. You don't have a lot of entrepreneurs, or people with entrepreneurship experience. So it's very, very difficult. And people are not. They don't want to, or they don't understand about risks. So you need to pay a good salary, it's expensive, and the competition is strong.
But I guess to identify them, one good place is Endeavor in São Paulo. I have been working with them very much, and they're they have branches in Brazil. So one place to go is Endeavor to recruit these people.
Yeah, and I guess one of the things, they do have, monster-like sites in Brazil that you can also use. I agree, it's very hard to actually, because, you ask for a very specific profile, and then the responses you get, very few actually fit that profile. I think you have to have the patience and the willingness to take people that are, I would actually go the other way. If you can't find somebody experienced that you can hire, you have to hire somebody a little bit younger who you think has a lot of promise, who you can train to do that job, because it's very hard to get exactly the person you want. Except in your case, where you did.
That's great. Other questions? So I wonder if we could just quickly, as we...
There's a question over there.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, sir. Yep.
It's not really a question, but just a small point that perhaps will add to what they have said. There's a very big construction group in Brazil that has interests in petrochemicals, in ethanol production, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Last year, they hired 20,000 people, and this year their goal was to hire another 20,000 people. So it's not easy to find people to work in startups.
Why not? Go ahead.
My name is Fernanda Martinez. I'm with the Trade Promotion Bureau at the Brazilian Consulate. And I just would like to add that in the panel you discussed that you are seeing much of venture capital money from the market side and not so much from the government. And the good news is that the Brazilian government is becoming very much active in this field, so we are going to hear a lot about, we are creating a Brazil startup plan, and there is the plan Brazil TI Maior. So the Brazilian Trade Promotion Agency, Apex, is also launching office in the Silicon Valley in the next month. So, and at the consulate, we are a small office, but we are trying also to work a lot with entrepreneurs and companies in this space. So, you're going to see, to hear a lot more about the government actions in this field.
Well, I'm glad to see this panel is already having an effect on the Brazilian government. Really amazing. So as we just have a minute or two left, I wanted to ask a question around the university system and whether there's what you all feel about innovation in and around universities, faculty members, researchers, students. Clearly in the US, that's a really hotbed of innovation. Take a look at a lot of the startups that have been growing the last few years. They've all been started up by either faculty members or students right on campus or just off of campus, etc. What's going on the campuses in Brazil? Give us some insight. Daniel?
Comment on the start here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was there in July, actually in May, and I found this article from Washington Post saying Brazil, home of the next Mark Zuckerberg. So this person, Vivek Wadhwa, went to Brazil and found, he specifically mentions Unicamp, which is his university, one of the best in Brazil. They have a very good entrepreneurship center there, and that's where he made his remark.
Okay.
So things are extremely well there in Brazil. In this
okay.
Steve, Daniel's got a printed out answer for every one of your questions.
I've never seen a guy on a panel that I've run.
He's the board member. He knows everything that we have.
He is prepared. He's number one. I've already got his name, his email address, and every time I need a speaker for my next panel, I know where to come to.
I have a very serious opinion about universities and what we are doing with students. I think the companies are far from universities. This is my opinion. We are trying to change this inside our company in partnership with Unicamp. I think we are working hard, but I think that we are far from the ideal. In my opinion, the biggest gap in the system, the Brazilian system, is we don't have a lot of exits. So we don't have a Larry Page, we don't have Steve Jobs, or we don't have a Twitter founder to go to university and inspire guys, students to be entrepreneurs. So we are doing this, yeah, but it's starting right now. So we would have to wait a little more to this thing start happening, really happening. And we need mentors. So we need people like Danielle, I don't know, like me, like Fred, going to Brazilian universities, talking with students, making pitches, motivating these guys to develop their ideas. So, and in investments, massive investments, please tell this to government, this is my opinion, in incubators and accelerators. To prepare these guys. To be totally honest, I don't think that we don't have money in Brazil today. We have a lot of money. What we don't have is we don't have good projects. We don't have enough good people, good entrepreneurs with good ideas. So I am an angel investor in Campinas, and we see a lot of very poor ideas, and people, they are amazing, very talented people, very talented students. The potential is huge, but we need to invest more in the base to collect the results in the future.
I'm gonna vote for you. Let me say two completely different opinions here. The point is, when I started in 1991, 1989, out of the university, there was absolutely nothing. So what I see, that's why I see a lot of improvement in his opinion.
I'm comparing with Silicon Valley, Daniel.
We are two behind, I agree.
We need to think very aggressive.
But because they are seeing two different things here. I wonder what they are thinking. There is nothing there, or there is something there. There is a lot of energy. If you go to my university and go to the entrepreneurships, I'm going to go back there. It's a lot of the energy. They have 700 entrepreneurs. You go to Unicamp, a lot of energy there. I have never seen this in my life.
Okay.
You are right.
But Fred, we don't have
But in my opinion, it's not enough. We need to invest more. We have talent.
Okay, Fred, let's give Fred a chance.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, from the other side of universities, from the point of view of developing IP-able projects, right. I think that there's actually a lot of projects that are sitting inside the university, but what's missing is, again, back to what we've been saying, you need the combination of the idea, the entrepreneur, the business plan, the investment community coming together. And the problem is that you have, hundreds of very smart scientists with very interesting projects, but they're all very raw. When you see them as an investor, you look at it, you're like, this sounds really interesting, but how could I possibly work with you alone and try to make this happen? If you got yourself an entrepreneur with you and another scientist and a clinician, and you guys put a plan together, then you'd have a company here. So I think that's what's missing. It's that link between academia and industry to develop products.
And definitely the scientists, they don't have this culture, this business culture in Brazil.
It's starting off.
Andre?
Brazil is likely. I did medical school in a public university in Brazil, and I work at Stanford. What happened is you have usually in Brazil, for a lot of them, the most talented people go to public universities where there's no culture of entrepreneurship.
So there is some culture. We just need to push much more.
But the university doesn't offer what Fred just said, kind of the culture, how to integrate with the business people, and how to do the dynamics.
Yeah, they need to be educated there on what we're doing here. Andre?
You're going to call me bad names now, but I think entrepreneurship, it happens between scarcity and abundance. That's what happened. And down there, we're finishing. I mean, we're starting to do the necessary to finish well done in order to do the important and the urgent stuff. So we're doing the necessary now. The government is doing the stuff, the work for that, its job. But my vision for that is that university provides execution. I mean, provides engineers and provides a good way to execute. Let's get Steve Jobs, never went to university. He's an entrepreneur. He just gathered the knowledge and the people able to make it. So, and there's a lot of, some of those guys we have mentioned here, none of them went to universities. So they just use the knowledge and the people out of the university as raw material to build the businesses.
Alan, what are you seeing on universities?
I would focus on a slightly different piece, and some people have mentioned the idea of culture, and Endeavor focuses on kind of all different types of capital. And cultural capital is actually one that I think is fundamentally important, and universities can play a huge role in, right? And this is this idea of, when we're talking about mentorship and role models, and really when you boil it down, we're talking about trust. people really just fundamentally need to trust each other more. And universities can be an environment where that can be built and then last for a lifetime. And I think it's no accident that in places like Silicon Valley, you see people 3 decades later starting companies with people they went to college with, or were here at Stanford with. And I think the more of that can happen, so I mean, it's a little more focusing on the touchy-feely side of it, but I think it also matters a ton is sort of the cultural shift of how people think about entrepreneurship or think about taking risks. Well, that has to do with how much do I trust this guy sitting next to me, and can we do it together? I do trust him, for the record, even though we just met an hour ago.
All right, with that, we're going to draw this to a close. This has been really a great couple of hours. I want to personally thank Margarita. Where is she? Okay, why don't you come up here? You put this fantastic Bay Brazil conference on. It was oversubscribed. You have a stellar group of speakers this morning. This panel has been fantastic, and what a great audience. So you should be congratulated. And I want to thank my panelists, because these guys are giving up of their spare time to spend some time with you and give some of their experiences. And they've been very candid, very honest about their opinions, but you can see how much passion there is about the opportunities for Brazil. So I think they all ought to be congratulated. Thank you.